When the CEO brought his 24-year-old son into our firm as senior director of operations, everyone knew it was pure nepotism. But nobody expected what happened on his first day. He walked over to my desk while I was out getting coffee, placed his designer laptop next to my personal items, and snapped a selfie. 10 minutes later, he posted it on LinkedIn with the caption, "Finally running this place." He thought I was just a quiet senior auditor who would pack up her things and cry in the bathroom. He had no idea he'd just taken a picture sitting in front of a confidential compliance terminal. I downloaded the post, attached it to a PDF of our corporate governance charter, and emailed it straight to the board of directors with a single line. Per Clause 7, he just voided the entire $40 million acquisition. Here is how a quiet employee checked a billionaire CEO in 4 moves. My name is Evelyn Reed. At 28 years old, I had spent the last 4 years working as a senior internal auditor at Sterling Global Financial. If you walked past my cubicle, you probably wouldn't notice me, and that was entirely by design. In a corporate world filled with sharp elbows and loud personalities, I was the quiet observer who preferred spreadsheets to office politics. I knew every policy, every compliance loophole, and every line item in our financial disclosures. Executives treated me like part of the furniture, completely unaware that I was watching everything. That dynamic shattered the morning our CEO, Arthur Sterling, introduced his 24-year-old son, Julian, as our new senior director of operations. Julian had 0 experience, a degree he barely earned, and an overwhelming sense of entitlement. While the rest of the staff smiled politely and swallowed their frustration at the blatant nepotism, Julian strutted through the department as if he had built the company himself. What Julian didn't realize was that he was stepping onto a volatile playing field. Sterling Global was in the middle of finalizing a high-stakes, $40 million merger with an international investment group. The deal required strict, non-negotiable regulatory oversight, and even the smallest legal misstep could tear the whole thing apart. Arthur thought he could sneak his golden boy into a corner office to claim credit for the deal's success. He had no idea that Julian's arrogance was about to collide directly with the firm's most dangerous rule. On Monday morning, Julian decided he needed a desk that matched his self-appointed importance. Mine was the only corner station on the floor with dual ultra-wide monitors and direct line of sight to the executive suite. While I was down in the cafeteria getting coffee, Julian walked over, dumped his leather bag on my desk, and announced to my team that he was reallocating prime office space to optimize workflow. When I returned, I found him leaning back in my chair with his feet propped on the wooden rim. He didn't even apologize. Instead, he pulled out his phone, adjusted his designer tie, placed his laptop right next to my personal photo frame, and snapped a wide-angle selfie. 10 minutes later, a colleague quietly showed me her screen. Julian had already posted the photo to his 10,000 LinkedIn followers with the caption, "Day 1. Finally running this place." He thought he was just flexing on his network. He thought he was putting a quiet auditor in her place. What he didn't realize, because he hadn't spent a single second learning how our department actually functioned, was what appeared in the background of his viral photo. My left monitor was actively running our secure compliance terminal, displaying proprietary, unannounced financial figures for the upcoming $40 million acquisition. And right at the bottom of the screen was a bold red banner referencing the company's strictest governance policy, Clause 7. To the average person, Clause 7 sounded like boring legal boilerplate buried deep inside the company's governance charter. But to anyone who actually understood corporate law, it was a deadly landmine. Clause 7 was a non-negotiable provision designed to protect board members from insider trading and regulatory fines. It explicitly stated that any public exposure or unauthorized viewing of pre-acquisition data by non-vetted personnel would immediately trigger a freeze on executive bonuses, halt the deal, and initiate an independent board audit. Julian wasn't vetted. He hadn't signed the non-disclosure agreements required for the merger, nor had he completed the mandatory security clearances. By broadcasting those confidential numbers to 10,000 people online, he hadn't just made a harmless social media post. He had committed a catastrophic compliance breach. I didn't yell at him, and I didn't demand my chair back. I simply walked over to an empty desk down the hall, opened my laptop, and began gathering the evidence. I saved high-resolution screenshots of his LinkedIn post, verified the exact timestamps, and cross-referenced the open files on my terminal log. Meanwhile, Julian was sitting at my desk, laughing with a couple of junior managers and boasting about how he was going to streamline operations. He was completely oblivious to the fact that while he was gloating about his new corner desk, he had unknowingly stepped right into a legal trap that could destroy his father's career. I didn't take my evidence to HR, and I didn't go to Arthur Sterling. HR served the CEO, and Arthur served his son. Instead, I packaged the high-resolution screenshots, the verified server logs, and the exact section of the corporate charter into a single PDF. I attached it to an email and sent it directly to the independent board of directors, bypassing the executive team entirely. Within 90 minutes, an emergency board meeting was called. I was summoned to the main boardroom on the top floor, a room I'd never stepped foot in before. The atmosphere inside was suffocating. 8 board members sat around a massive marble table, their faces grim. CEO Arthur Sterling sat at the head, looking more annoyed than concerned, while Julian stood near the back, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, trying to look unimpressed. "Evelyn," the board's head legal counsel said, her voice like ice. "Walk us through this document." Before I could speak, Arthur scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "This is absurd. My son took a harmless selfie on his first day to build company morale. A quiet auditor misread the screen. We can delete the post and move on. There's no reason to derail a $40 million acquisition over a millennial's enthusiasm." "It wasn't just a selfie, Arthur," the legal counsel replied, placing my printed report in front of him. "Look at the left monitor in the background. That is unreleased acquisition data on an unencrypted stream, broadcast to 10,000 people." She turned the page to Clause 7. As Arthur read the highlighted lines, the color drained from his face. Julian's smug expression instantly vanished as he realized the board wasn't looking at me. They were looking at him. The moment the board meeting adjourned for an emergency executive session, Arthur cornered me in a private conference room down the hall. The polished CEO composure he maintained for the media was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, flushed anger. "Evelyn," he said, stepping into my personal space while trying to keep his voice down. "You're a bright young woman with a long career ahead of you, but you're making a massive mistake here. Julian made a naive error, and you're blowing it out of proportion. If this deal falls through, the company suffers, and your job won't be safe either." He paused, lowering his tone to a manipulative whisper. "I can make you a junior partner in compliance by the end of the quarter. A 40% pay raise. All you have to do is sign a statement saying your terminal was undergoing routine maintenance, and the data shown on screen was simulated placeholder text." I looked Arthur straight in the eye, completely unbothered by his threat. "Mr. Sterling," I said quietly. The moment Clause 7 was flagged, the server automatically mirrored the encrypted audit logs to our external compliance escrow firm. Attempting to falsify those records now wouldn't just be a policy violation, it would be a federal crime. The data was live, and Julian exposed it. Arthur stared at me as the harsh reality set in. For years, he had treated me like an invisible, replaceable employee. Now he realized that the quietest person in the room held the power to destroy everything he had built. The board acted with ruthless speed to protect the $40 million acquisition from collapsing. To satisfy regulatory authorities and avoid a full freeze on the deal, they had to demonstrate that the compliance breach was dealt with immediately and decisively. First came Julian. Before lunch, 2 security guards entered my former office, handed Julian a box for his belongings, and escorted him out of the building in full view of the entire staff. His title was stripped, his security badge revoked, and he was officially banned from setting foot on corporate grounds. The arrogance that he had carried into the office just days earlier was completely shattered. Next came Arthur. The board determined that his attempt to cover up his son's actions constituted a severe breach of his fiduciary duty. Rather than face a public scandal and an immediate vote of no confidence, Arthur was forced to submit his immediate resignation, masked publicly as an early retirement. To maintain stability during the transition, the board brought in a seasoned interim leader to finalize the merger. On his second day, he called me into the executive suite, the very office Julian had tried to claim, and offered me a promotion to head of corporate governance. My salary doubled, and my authority expanded across the entire department. The $40 million deal went through 6 weeks later, completely clean and fully compliant. By trying to assert dominance over a quiet employee, Arthur and Julian hadn't just lost a corner desk, they had handed over the keys to the kingdom. Sitting in my new executive office overlooking the city, I couldn't help but reflect on how quickly everything had shifted. In the corporate world, people often mistake silence for weakness and humility for a lack of ambition. Bullies like Julian and Arthur rely on intimidation, assuming that those who don't fight back simply don't have the stomach for a confrontation. They never suspect that the quietest person in the room might just be waiting for them to make a fatal mistake. You don't need to shout to be powerful, and you don't need a famous last name to control the outcome. Sometimes, all it takes is knowing your worth, understanding the rules better than anyone else, and having the patience to let your opponent hang themselves with their own arrogance. I built this career from the ground up, and standing my ground didn't just save my job, it transformed my life. So, to anyone listening who feels overlooked or undervalued at their workplace, keep your eyes open, stay sharp, and remember that knowledge is the ultimate leverage. Now, I'm curious about your thoughts. Have you ever seen corporate nepotism backfire in real life, or faced a boss who thought they were above the rules? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to mention what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has reached.